Happy to be here with my very special guest this week, screenwriter James Roberts. James, how are you?
I'm excellent, thank you. Thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were talking before we started that this has been we're recording this on February 8th. Is it me or has 2024 already seemed like a year and a half?
Yeah, it's I can't believe it's already February, and then I also can't believe it's only February. So
I know I feel like you could fit 2 months into January. It's
yeah,
just it's in the as I'm sure in the writing and the filmmaking world, it can all be a blur. And it just
yeah,
seems like a lot happens in
absolutely.
such a short amount of time. So I appreciate you taking the time to have this chat. And I always like to get started, with the kind of learning the backstory of how people got into the industry, because as I'm sure you know, there's not like a how-to guidebook or like the old idiot's guide to like cooking or whatever the case may be. There's not one of those for filmmaking.
Right.
So what was it that led you to wanting to become a screenwriter?
Well, I'd always loved creating stories, and when I was a kid, I'd play with my action figures, and I'd have these kind of sweeping epics that would continue over days, and I'd have plot lines that would continue, and I've just always loved kind of world building and sort of escaping in my imagination. And when I was in high school, I had some really great teachers. I took a class called Writer's Craft, which was basically entirely just about writing. It was, we would do poetry and short stories and all these different subjects. And I had a really supportive teacher named Kim Bloomfield, and she encouraged my writing. She would share, she gave me copies of the movie Terry Gilliam movie Brazil, and she would give me books to read, just kind of feeding uh, my interest and finding things I would like. So she was super encouraging, and film had always been, watching movies as a kid was always like my favorite thing. My buddies and I loved, especially horror movies. We'd get together and watch a lot of horror movies. So it just felt like, yeah, I want to try writing screenplays. And, it just so happened I had a music teacher. Her name was Linda Wharton. And she said, "Oh, I hear you're enjoying writing screenplays." And I was doing a project on a way to do like a careers project, what you want to do. And I was doing screenwriting, and she said, I have a cousin who writes screenplays. And I said, "Oh, really? What movies has he done?" And she said, "Oh, he's done X-Men and X-Men 2." And she started listing all these movies. And her cousin is a screenwriter named David Hayter, who also does, some voice acting in the Metal Gear Solid franchise, etc. So I got to interview him for my high school project on screenwriting, and he was very gracious with his time and really gave me some encouragement. And I was lucky enough to have him read some of my stuff, over the years and get feedback from him. And it was kind of, just the encouragement of those people around me that really made me want to keep going and pursuing it.
That's fantastic. And I don't think you can stress enough the importance of having a support system, regardless of, what you do, whether it's, in your case, screenwriting or, some other form of entertainment. It's a hard thing to get into because it's so competitive and you really got to stand out. And I think, it can be demoralizing, if you write something and it gets rejected or you audition and you get rejected. It's great to have that support system to fall back on. And especially, with you having teachers, that influenced you at a young age. That's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the rejection in show business, whether you're an actor or a writer or whatever, there's a lot of rejection. And, having I, everything from confidence and courage to keep trying, it really does come down to um, sometimes it is just that one person giving you positive reinforcement that'll help you keep going, and it can get demoralizing if you don't have a good system around you. And I've been lucky enough to be surrounded by very supportive, encouraging people. So yeah, there's ups and downs, but it's been I don't regret a second of trying to pursue the arts.
So, and mentioning, all these teachers and then being able to talk with, the writer of X-Men 1 and 2, did you get any advice early on in your writing career that has stuck with you to this day?
I've gotten a lot of good advice actually. Whether from entering contests or whatever. The first script I wrote, I entered it into contests. I was like, I think like 19 or something. I was like, okay, I'm gonna put this in the contest. It's like a full script, and it got like obliterated. It got like, this is terrible. Like, but there was one reader that gave me some positive feedback and said, there's a voice in here, but it just doesn't know how to write a screenplay. And I was like, oh, I should probably go how to like actually study and practice and learn how to properly do this before I keep trying to put things out there. So I did take some time to, get feedback, study the masters, so to speak. And I think, and this ties into Here for Blood. The best piece of writing advice I'd ever heard was from a writer and actor named Danny Strong. He was in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and he's gone on to write a number of TV shows and films now. But he said he wrote a script that he was taking around town trying to sell, and he realized at one point after rejection after rejection after rejection, he kind of looked at the script and he had this realization: if this came out, if this movie got made, he goes, I wouldn't go see it. He kind of had this epiphany, like he was writing what he thought other people would want to see, and he said, you really have to just write what you would absolutely, no question, have to go see. And that's, for me, what Here for Blood is. That's basically what I did, was just put everything I love into this, script. It's the wrestling and the horror and this, the over the top nature of it all. I just really combined it all to make it that thing that, for me personally, I would have to go see.
That's some great self-awareness for somebody to say, you know what, I wouldn't even go see this. So that's pretty incredible. But that's actually an excellent segue to Here for Blood. So how did the idea come about, and how was the process of creating that story?
Well, so originally I was approached by a producer based out of LA. He had optioned a script of mine and was taking it around, and he said, "Can you write a lower budget horror movie as well?" And I said, "Sure, I can do that." And he gave me a lot of parameters, a lot of really strict guidelines that he wanted to see. And one of the notes that I thought was kind of odd and interesting was he wanted it to have a male protagonist, because he said there's certain countries that a movie won't sell in for whatever reason if it has a female protagonist. And I'm like, okay, so we need a horror movie with a male protagonist, which immediately makes it, more difficult. So I came up with the concept of, this kind of unexpected babysitter, showing up, and then when the home invasion happens, they weren't expecting him. And the early script version I wrote was very super violent and kind of grim. It wasn't very fun, to be honest. There wasn't a lot of humor in it, which wasn't like, it's not like my kind of writing. I like to inject a lot of humor into stuff. So nothing really ever happened with that. And I liked the concept. And again, I gave it that test. I took a look at it and I was like, I wouldn't have to go see this if it came out. This wouldn't be something I'd have to go see. And I thought, well, like, how can I make this more fun? And the first thought I had is, well, what if the babysitter was a professional wrestler? A Roddy Piper type. What if he was like one of those guys, like Roddy Piper from They Live was a babysitter, So that was like, okay, that's fun. And then, I'm like, well, let's have some fun with it. Let's have it be, again, with that kind of over the top theatrical nature for wrestling, let's have the violence be reflected in that, and let's have it go so over the top it's just a really fun kind of campy splatter fest, and then bringing the supernatural elements into the film that are there kind of towards the set at the the midpoint we get into that. But it was everything I loved, because it gave us more leeway for the practical effects that I grew up loving, so we could have more fun with the blood splatter and the gore, so to speak. And that was sort of the difference in the first draft. The gore was not fun. And this one is twisted as that sounds. In this one I wanted the version that people will see. I wanted the violence and the blood splatter and the gore to be funny, almost like a Looney Tunes cartoon for adults, just kind of like Itchy and Scratchy, I guess.
Yeah.
To some extent.
Yeah, no, I love how you described it as Roddy Piper from They Live as a babysitter, because that They Live is one of my favorite movies, and I'm a big wrestling fan. I have been since the '90s, so like I was sold just based off the description anyway. And I find that as I've gotten older and have studied more film and watched more movies, especially from a different perspective as a filmmaker, I feel like horror is the genre where you have the most like flexibility. Like you can make something really dark and scary, and then you can also make a horror comedy. Like Zombieland comes to mind. It has that fun, kind of over the top humor, but still has the horror elements, like with the zombies and everything. So, do you feel the same way about horror?
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that, and I think it's sort of the fantastical element. You know what I mean? People, especially diehard genre fans, know that you can't go into horror movies all the time expecting realistic things that make sense in real life. You sort of have to suspend belief. Same with professional wrestling. You have to go in to enjoy the show, and there's always the one guy that goes, "Well, that looked fake," and it's like, well, that's not the point. You know what I mean? They're not really going to try to paralyze each other with chairs. They're there to have fun and entertain. That's the point of it. So I
It's a
would
form of
totally agree
theater.
that it's a form of theater, absolutely. And I think horror and wrestling kind of have that similar element. So when I combine them, I think people going in, um, they know that it's with that wrestling, in mind. They know that they're going to see something not realistic and purposely exaggerated and over the top. And I think that yeah, you're right. Like if you were to have a serious crime film and all of a sudden those laws of physics and we're starting to be broken, I think people would start to question the legitimacy of the film. But in horror, we have a little more leeway than that.
Yeah, and I think that's what's great about the genre too, is that like and I think about this with most movies anyway, but especially horror. You got to go in and, like you said, suspend disbelief. Like you have to just immerse yourself in the world, because that's why I love movies and TV so much, is the escapism. You can watch something, like Here for Blood, and be, you can escape from your problems for a little while and be entertained.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. Is I really wanted a feel good happy ending. I guess I'm a bit of a sucker for a happy ending. So I that's what we really just wanted is hopefully people when they watch it they feel entertained. They're having fun and they feel good after, and it's almost like a warm blanket, so to speak. Which as a horror fan, one of those movies for me is like Tremors, for example. I can watch Tremors and I always feel so good after watching it, and so I really wanted to have that sort of um, you know upbeat ending for you for when an audience member leaves or turns it off of streaming or whatever. They feel awesome and they're like, hey, that's pretty cool, like and to make it fun and exciting in that
I feel like that should have been the tagline for the movie. It's like a warm blanket.
way. Of blood, yes.
Yeah, a warm blanket, dot 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 of blood. That's
Yes.
awesome. I could see that on a poster. So did you get to go on set at all for
Oh,
the shooting?
yeah, I was there every day because I also
Oh,
produced on the
sweet.
film as well. Yeah, so
Okay,
I
cool.
was I was there every day. I was, as we were independent, you know what I mean. I was transporting some of the crew and the talent to set. I was troubleshooting any problems we had. So yeah, I was there every day or every
And
night, I
how?
should say. It was all night shoots, so every
Oh,
night,
all
I
night
should say.
shoots. Okay.
Yeah.
How long did it take you guys to shoot the film?
Oh, I think we did it in like 31 days. I think. I don't quote me on that because it was like a literal blur. But I got to look at the shooting schedule. I haven't done that in a while. But yeah, it was about 31 days, I think.
And that's the thing with especially independent film, is like once you get started, it's almost like a sprint and a marathon combined. It's
Yeah.
just like you said, you're wearing a lot of hats. You might be taking care of catering one minute, and then the next you might be, trying to find a missing cable or something like that. So
Exactly. Power
it's an adventure.
outages, yeah, whatever happened, and we were shooting in the middle of COVID, and so we had to have really strict rules on set because we worked with a union cast. So we had to have medics on set, we had to have rapid tests available, we had to, kind of keep everybody as safe and separate as we could. So that added a whole extra, layer of difficulty for us. And the fear of getting a COVID case, because we would have had to shut down for 2 weeks as per the guidelines, and that would have, like, for an independent film, that would ruin you. You'd have to push everything back, try to rebook everything, try to get the locations and the talent and all these things back together. So we were very lucky in that respect. We didn't have any illness on set, and luckily we got it done.
The COVID era was very, very interesting, because I worked on a short film locally here during COVID, and it was a very small crew. There was maybe like 4 or 5 of us. There were 1 to 2 actors, all having to keep our distance unless absolutely necessary and things like that. But still, for the love of the craft and being able to do it, most everyone I talked to during that time frame, they were able to handle it, about as best you can given the
Yeah,
circumstances.
yeah, it was just, everybody was rolling with it, and luckily, the point we were at during shooting, we had been in the pandemic for a while, so it wasn't new, and we did know sort of, we had more information, and the guidelines at the very beginning were, I think, well, I mean, most things shut down, but we luckily there was a blueprint on how to do things properly and safely that we were able to apply, which really, saved our bacon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I always like to ask this too, with especially an independent film. I almost compare it like to summer camp, because you all become almost like a family because you spend so much time together. Do you have any like funny or memorable moments from the set
Oh my
that
gosh.
stick out to you?
I mean, there was a ton. Usually when the blood was flying. One of my favorite moments that I still laugh about to this day. Maya Misljevic, who plays Grace, the young girl in the movie, she was 10 when we were shooting, so she had been around this whole time. There's blood flying everywhere, literally everywhere. And there's a scene in the film where she gets to stab somebody with a knife. So she stabs the fake leg with the knife, and she pulls the knife out, and it wasn't so over the top. We just had a little blood come out, and we called cut. And she goes, "Is that it? That's so weak." She wanted like gallons of blood. She wanted to be in on it with everybody else and have all she wanted all the same, geyser of blood shooting all over her. But she was very disappointed that wasn't the case.
That I hope somebody got that on camera because that's got to be fantastic. I just see this 10-year-old girl go lame.
Yeah, she was like, "Is that it? That was so weak." Like she was so upset that she didn't get absolutely drenched in blood in that moment. So
Oh
yeah.
man, that's fantastic. That's what I love about working on a set. Is that it can be really hard days, but if you got the right crew and you got the right cast, it's worth it. All the long hours are absolutely worth it. And then like
Mm.
when you're done, you're exhausted, but then a couple of days later, you're like, I could do another one.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing too is, we shot this in Canada in, fall, so it was freezing cold. It was all night shoots. There's, scenes where Sean's outside, covered in fake blood, fighting. It's like freezing to his skin. It's getting so cold. And, you're just kind of standing there and the sun's about to come up and you're just going like, why did I do this? Why did I do this to myself? Why didn't I do like something set during the day? Like, everybody was so tired, but luckily, especially the cast, they were such troopers. They were professionals. Everybody got through it, and yeah, we were very lucky.
That's fantastic. Well, I'm excited to watch the film. So before we get into like where people can watch the movie and whatnot, what's next for you? Do you have any other scripts in the works?
Yeah, I do have some things in development. We'll say. Right now, my focus is on getting Here for Blood out and to as large an audience as possible. If some people have been asking me if we're going to do a sequel, that depends. If people like it and there's a demand, then I'd be more than happy to get back into the world that it's set in. But until then, we'll see. But yeah, I do have a few things I'm working on, but nothing I can announce at this time, or unfortunately. But
Yeah, no worries. And speaking of your movie, where can people watch it?
Oh, Screenbox. It will be streaming on Screenbox February 9th, and it's coming out. We're doing a limited theatrical run as well. So it's going to be playing in Los Angeles, Atlanta, Houston, Dallas, and Orlando, Florida.
Oh, some good markets. That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
That's real cool. And do you have a website or social media that you'd like to plug so the viewers and listeners can follow you?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find the film on Instagram and Twitter at Here for Blood. You can find me on Twitter. I'm at James Roberts 519. You can also follow Screenbox and Bloody Disgusting. They'll keep you updated as to the goings on with the film as well.
Fantastic. Well, James, thank you so much for taking the time to have this chat with me. This was awesome.
Thank you. I appreciate it.